Hi, this is Meridith Elliott Powell, and you know what time it is. It is time for Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to, well, turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. And you are so lucky today. I've got an amazing guest. I have been all morning reading about Jamie MoCrazy and her method for really helping you be strong, more resilient, and what I love is to create your own luck. So let me go ahead and start the show and we'll learn Jamie's story and give you the tips you need to really turn uncertainty to opportunity. All right, welcome back to Thrive. I don't want to waste any more time. Jamie, I want you to tell the audience just a little bit about you, about your journey, and how you got on this path to resilience and creating the MoCrazy method.
Awesome. I'm so happy to be here. So let's get started. I grew up with a mom who had a federal grant from the government to teach self-esteem for women. And so she raised me with the belief that I could accomplish whatever I wanted to if I was willing to put in the time and the effort. And so I was also very competitive and became a professional slopestyle skier, which is where you go down and you hit multiple jumps and you slide rails. At my time of competing, it was an X Games activity. And I actually became the first woman in the world to double flip at X Games because I had that belief that if I put in the time and I did it on the water amps, which is when you slide down plastic and flip into a pool. And then I did it. Well, first I did on the trampoline, then the water amps, and then I could do it on snow. And then my life took a very abrupt change when on April 11th, 2015, I was competing in World Tour Finals up in Whistler, Canada. And it actually was my little sister's first World Tour Finals that she had made to compete on her own. And this day she was watching the slopestyle and she gave me a hug when I dropped in for my run. And on my second run, I was doing an off-axis backflip, and on landing, I landed on my feet, but I caught an edge, and I whiplashed my head onto the snow in such a way that my brain started bleeding in 8 spots.
Oh my
And
God.
I hurt my right brainstem, which instantly paralyzed the right side of my body. And I immediately went into a natural coma on the mountain. And I know all this because when my little sister didn't see me hit the next jump, which happens a lot in slopestyle, she knew I must have fallen. But then she heard the ski patrol radio crackle to life saying, "We need all hands on deck and a helicopter on standby." And she knew it was really bad. So when she skied down, she saw me and I was convulsing, I was spewing blood, and my eyes were rolled back in my head. And I only know this through other people's experience of it because I have no memory of the day. I was in a coma for 10 days. I have no memory of that time. And then I had serious amnesia for a couple of months. So I have no memory of that time of my life either. So there's a couple of months that are just completely not my own personal memories. And that part of my life has built into who I am today. And we can get to it later in the conversation, but we have a brain injury nonprofit, and all the work that we do tied into legislation, opportunities, education programs surrounding brain injury was all created from that moment that I have no personal recollection of.
So take us back. So there you eventually wake up in the hospital and you've had these, you're are you still paralyzed? Like what was the process of of going forward? And then I really want you to get into because one of my favorite parts of your website when I was reading about you was it's really a team. It's really you, your mom, and your sister. And I love that your mother just just implanted this confidence and the self-esteem, which I think is something not only missing from women today, but just people in general. So kind of take us back, like what was your journey to get back to where you are today?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my journey had a lot of aspects to it. So the initial stages of the journey, when I woke up in the hospital, I still had serious amnesia. I was still in a wheelchair. The right side of my body was still paralyzed. When my mind started to come back, I could hobble a little bit. I
Yeah.
could walk a bit. I was on a gait leash, which is like a human leash.
Okay.
Um, a gay belt, and I couldn't walk upstairs by myself. But as soon as my mind started to return, like my short term and my long term memory started to return, I had the idea that I had been brought up with, that if you set attainable goals, you can reach your growth goals. And your attainable goals are goals you can accomplish every day that lead you on the path of your growth goal. So, for example, on when I wanted to go back to skiing as soon as I woke up, that wasn't even really a question for me if I was skiing. I couldn't walk upstairs by myself. So I set the attainable goal of walking up the stairs over and over again so I would reach that growth goal of being able to return to skiing.
Wow. And that was something that you had learned as a child from your mother and her work with self-esteem?
Yeah, it was just kind of innate. When my mind was coming back, it just was who I was and what I understood to accomplish goals.
Yeah. So where do you, I mean, the level of resiliency that you had to have to make it back to the mountain. Talk about where do you go on those days when you aren't confident, when you don't have belief, when those voices in your head, creep in. What is your process? Like where do you go and how did you continue to move forward?
Well, one of the things that I think really helped me with my recovery process was the initial stages were very visible and I had a lot of attention towards them. So when I was relearning how to walk, when I was relearning how to ride a bike, relearning how to ski, I had a lot of attention and applause for every step that I was taking. It became much more challenging when other people didn't understand what I was working on with my emotional stability and my cognition. For those to return, it took multiple years. I would say a good 5 years for
Wow.
my cognition to get back to being the type of adult that I want to be. And during that time, nobody understood the battle that I was fighting. And so that was much harder. And it also was challenging because um, a lot of the middle stages, like going from like the very visible to the very invisible, was just getting back to what you learned how to do through your whole childhood
Mhm.
and growing up. So relearning it makes you feel embarrassed and
Yeah.
depressed that you have to relearn these stages to get back to normalcy.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
So you take everything. So from start to how many years before you made it back on the mountain?
So returning to skiing was actually very fast. I went back about 8 months afterwards with the National Ability Center in Park City, Utah.
Mhm. Did you have any insecurity? I mean, what did that feel like?
So the return to skiing, I was actually very confident about it. I was really excited, and I went back with a center, National Ability Center, that deals with cognitive and physical disabilities. So I had people who were trained to deal with individuals like me,
Mhm.
which was incredibly important because if I had been left on my own, I would have pushed it beyond my capabilities too
Yeah.
fast. But with them, it was a very safe environment. So that actually was when I had the most confidence. I was super happy to return to skiing. Only I realized by returning to skiing, I had to relearn how to ski, which meant I had to relearn every trick that I knew as a professional skier. And I had been a professional skier who was ranked first or second overall in the world for 3 consecutive years prior to my brain injury. I actually
Wow.
won the first ever junior world championships in New Zealand and was talking to the International Olympic Committee about adding slopestyle skiing to the Olympics. And so it seemed like I had a very bright future ahead of me. And that winter, when I realized that I had to relearn everything, I realized that I also would fall a lot because you fall when you're relearning. And I knew that the doctor said that if I hit my head again, I would have very severe consequences. And I had so many supporters, and honestly, my mom was so supportive. I couldn't risk dying in front of her.
Yeah.
It still gives me tears because if I knew that I was putting everybody's support and my life at that much risk, I don't think that would have been a sound decision to be making.
Mhm.
Um, some people say, well, you still went back to skiing. And I'm like, well, yes, I still get in a car.
Yeah.
And the most common places for traumatic brain injuries are actually slips and falls in the bathroom. So unless you're never going to get in a car and you're never going to go to the bathroom again, like I'm
Yeah.
going to go skiing. But I make much more calculated decisions in my skiing. Um, and so when I stepped out of competing, when I decided I wasn't going to return to competing, I actually stepped right into therapy because that's when I had the most emotional challenges.
Yeah.
And it wasn't feeling afraid of returning to snow. I never had fear for that. But it was a fear that I've struggled with for years of the fact that I had such a fabulous life that I was living that was just instantly taken away from me. And the feeling of mediocrity and not living up to my potential was something that I struggled with much more and struggled with for years afterwards.
Yeah, I can imagine because it's your identity, not only something that you love to do, but your identity. So what did you learn through what did you learn through that process? And the idea that I think that a lot of people struggle with, challenges in life, but not challenges that dramatic. That I've got another friend that was, Olympic hopeful, and through an accident, he wound up as an amputee, and it just dramatic in your life that everything that you thought you were going through, and then it's gone, and it's quick. What did you learn through the process about how to navigate something like that?
So, a lot of what I learned was it takes time,
Hmm.
um, patience, which I still struggle with. But being patient, however, also persistent. So, like if you have dreams and you have goals, strategically laying out plans to get them and to rebuild your identity is possible. So be patient with the amount of time it will take, but also make sure that you're always walking paths that will lead you in the direction you want to be walking. And that it's also okay to sometimes feel overwhelmed and upset when life changes. And instead of feeling guilty about that or feeling like that it shouldn't be happening, it's okay to feel upset and use that to kind of put fuel in the fire and catapult you to making um, more decisions to help you in the journey of rebuilding your identity.
Did you have to cast a new vision for yourself, or a new set of goals? And how difficult was it to, I mean, if you did, to really start to think about finding a purpose without competitive skiing in it?
Yeah, it was very difficult for me to find a purpose without competitive skiing. Something I did which helped tremendously was a year after my brain injury, I went back to university. And I went back for the purpose of having teachers, having goals, having structure to be able to perform
Mm-hmm.
and feel like you made accomplishments. And so sometimes at like finals week, I'm like, why did I want to come back to get graded?
Right. Why did I do this to myself?
Yeah, I kind of wonder. But that first semester, I actually ended up getting straight A's.
Wow. I did the same thing. My phone was on as well. Don't worry about it.
I got straight A's. And it was interesting because when I started the semester in like the math class, I got a C minus on my first test. And so I knew that if I wanted to have these results, I would need to go to tutoring and I would need to put in the work
Yeah.
and relearn these aspects of math that had been closed up in my brain pathways and how to reopen them and stuff, which is what we talk about a lot through like the MoCrazy method with our nonprofit is with an understanding of neuroplasticity, it is possible to rewire your brain. And after a brain injury, it's like a snowstorm to your brain. So all the brain pathways get covered with snow. And there's no fancy plows. You have to dig through those pathways. And the way you dig through those pathways is by repetition and habit building. And so over and over again to be able to get the results. And the first time you walk the path, it's almost impossible. And then the second time you walk the path back, it's almost just as hard. And so it takes a really long time before you start seeing some results start happening. And if you don't have like the belief and the trust that by taking these steps, you will be able to change your life and change your brain, you will probably be more likely to give up before you've walked the paths enough to see change.
And do you think that's what most people do? Is that I mean, I think just the information that's starting to come to light right now about the brain is just really amazing. That how much impact we have over that. Even if you spent your whole life one way, if there's still something you want, you can change those pathways. And first is to become conscious of it and to know that you do. But do you think that's what people do is they give up? Like I think of, people, I think it's fascinating that we live in a time when there is more information about how to get healthy, about how to get rich, about how to build a business, about how to be a great partner in life. And, yet we are suffering from we are the most depressed society. We're the most unhealthy society. We are a struggling society. And it certainly isn't for lack of information. So do you think it is in order to make the changes, it's first the understanding of the amount of work it's going to take and then the commitment to do it?
Yeah, and I think a little bit it's overwhelming how
Yeah.
much information we have and
Yeah.
how contradictory a lot of the information is to each other. And a lot of things like brain injury or public speaking, like everyone's story is unique and their own, but it has similarities. So like every brain injury is different. However, like a fingerprint, every brain injury is a finger. So even though the fingerprint is different, there are aspects of the nutrition you're putting into your body, the amount of sleep you're getting, the fact of like building repetitively new habits that you want to create pathways in your brain for. Those are all similarities that work. And it's like that with a lot of things in life. There are some similarities, but you have to take your own path and
Yeah.
you have to feel that the path that you're taking will actually lead you where you want to go.
So talk to us a little bit about the MoCrazy method, about about obviously, again, with the entire journey you went through and putting it into a set of steps that people could readily access and readily understand. Where did you come up with the idea and what is the methodology?
Well, so starting when I was still having a lot of recovery, people started reaching out to our family about how did I relearn how to walk again? How did I relearn how to talk? Because all those visible successes that I was doing, they wanted to replicate them. And certain things happened, like the fact that I regained mobility on the side of my body where my brainstem was damaged, and I did not sustain spasticity. And I regained fully my mobility. And two main things that added to that was the fact that I was actually getting massaged every day when my muscles were relearned and my everything was refiring.
Yeah.
Is an important thing. And then also, like when my right side was paralyzed, instead of coddling me and allowing me to keep that side paralyzed, and like when I couldn't hold a glass without my hand shaking, say, okay, hold it in your left hand.
Yeah.
My mom did the opposite. She tied down my strong hand, so I had to utilize my weak hand. And that is what actually causes you to rebuild your synaptic connections in your brain, is by using it. So if I hadn't ever used it, I would have stayed paralyzed very, very
Right.
easily.
So then what are the steps of the methodology?
Yeah. So um as I was saying, I got all sidetracked for a second, but as I was saying, we started getting reached out to. And so we
Yeah.
started giving peer-to-peer guidance from the initial stages. And then in September of 2022, we received our official 501c3 and became a nonprofit. And then last September was when we delivered our first MoCrazy Method session. And we have another one coming up this fall, so fall of 2024. And what it is it is encompassing my mom's master's in psychology and studying of early childhood brain development and the different certifications that she has, and tying it into traumatic brain injury specific recovery. So how to rebuild your life and steps to take of actually rebuilding your life, because there's kind of a gap after your critical stage ends. You still have that cognition and that emotional stability, and there are still so many aspects to rebuilding your life that are not visible, and there's not enough guidance, structure, understanding for individuals who have sustained a traumatic brain injury.
So when you think about everything that you went through, and then your mother's work in in early childhood brain development and her work in psychology, were there just was it looking back on the journey that you had, just like your mother tying your good hand down, which is just incredible, forcing you to to use the other pieces? Were these all like if it hadn't been her knowledge and her understanding, do you think your recovery would have been dramatically different?
In a way,
Yeah.
I do. I do think there was definitely some stages where I had to have the grit and determination as well. But if we
Yeah.
weren't working together, I don't think it would have happened. I do know many brain injury survivors who have visible disability and deficits. And a lot of them, if they worked through it the way I did, which also came from the understanding of being a professional athlete. You fail a lot,
Yeah.
and you have to work really hard and you don't see results. But all that work, you also have to have fun in the journey of working and be happy and enjoy yourself. And for me, that's doing outdoor activities and um, feeling joy. But you asked if it would have been the same, and I don't think it would have been the same, which is why we created this nonprofit, because there's so many people who have said, you're so lucky you had your mom, you're so lucky you had your mom, and we don't think that that luck should only be mine. And we do a lot of background work with the nonprofit. So we do legislation at the state level of Utah, but then also at the federal level and the Traumatic Brain Injury Acts, and could get all into it, but we do a lot with that. And we're working on these different programs and events and stuff like that with different nonprofits that we collaborate with. But that concept of that I'm so lucky purely because I had my mom is why we're trying to deliver her expertise. And I didn't mention it yet, but she also is actually a PhD candidate on mind-body medicine with a
Wow.
focus on traumatic brain injury recovery
Mhm.
to bring science behind a lot of what she did for me, so we can find the repetition of why it will help all brain injury survivors, not just me.
Yeah, and I think there's, we're definitely talking about, traumatic brain injuries, but there's so much in what you said, Jamie, that could be just applied to everybody in everyday life. I mean, the truth is that so many of us take our foot off the gas because we've become such an instant gratification society, or we think that we are just a way that we are, and there's nothing that we can do about, um, if you're not disciplined, you can't become disciplined. If you don't believe that you can change things at the level, that you can change them. So tell us about your life now. I mean, do you feel fully recovered and fully back to, or talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, as far as my recovery goes, I think it was great. I feel fully recovered, and I'm still a human being. So, like all human beings, I occasionally forget words and I occasionally forget my phone. But I would like to say I'm one of the most organized of my friends. A few of them are like, oh, if Jamie's planning a party, give it to Jamie. And part of that came from learning how to build the habits and structure things that I learned through my recovery from my brain injury, my in-depth rehab.
Yeah.
And so my life is good now, and I'm married and I live in Salt Lake City and I run a nonprofit and I do public speaking. And I'm always looking to grow more in like the neurotrauma community. So I think that I still have a lot more things to accomplish. Um, but last year in 2023 and 2024, we actually produced a documentary that we took on the film festival tour. And we actually were accepted to 17 different film festivals. And
Wow.
we went in person to 9 of them and won multiple awards. So it was a really rewarding experience. And every film festival we went to, there were 2 to 6 different families that came up to us afterwards and told us their direct connection to brain injury. Because
Yeah.
it's, according to the CDC, the largest acquired disability in the US, brain injury. And so it's kind of a silent pandemic, invisible pandemic. There's
Yeah.
so many people that are affected by it, even more people than acknowledge it to the public. There's a lot of individuals that I've come in contact with that have had stereotypically successful recoveries and are working high level jobs, and they don't tell anyone they had a brain injury and nobody knows because there's a
Mhm.
stigma tied to it that you won't be able to perform if you've had a brain injury at the expected level. So when people have had good recoveries, they quite often don't stick around in the brain injury community,
Yeah.
which is interesting because, like, if you have breast cancer, you're gonna stay a part of the breast cancer community after if you have survived it. And there are 240,000 individuals who are diagnosed with breast cancer per year, and over 1 million individuals are hospitalized for brain injury every year. So
Wow.
a huge problem that's just not getting enough awareness and attention.
Out there. So, it's hard to believe, but we are at the end of the show. Tell everybody how they find out more about your foundation, more about the work that you and your mother and your sister are doing, and just more about you and your story.
So the easiest way to find us is mocrazystrong.org, and that's MoCrazy STRONG, strong.org. Or you can find me on social media platforms at Jamie MoCrazy, JAMIE MoCrazy.
All right, we will have all of that in the show notes so people can find out more about you. And I really encourage people to go out to the website. The film is there. You can read more about Jamie's unbelievable story, her recovery, learn about her mother and her sister. So Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank all of you for joining us for another episode of Thrive. We'll see you right back here next week for another episode, another story, and another set of strategies you need to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage.
Thank you.